China delivers a $22 billion blow to U.S. trade by canceling soybean imports. In March 2025, China unexpectedly suspended the import of 1.8 million tons of American soybeans, causing a loss of $22 billion and marking a strategic shift in its trade relations. By canceling 16 major contracts, Beijing demonstrated its influence over global trade, where it controls 13% of the market. The impact was immediate for American farmers, with Missouri facing losses of up to $100 million. Beyond the economic repercussions, this decision reflects the growing tensions and long-term risks for U.S. exporters as China seeks new suppliers. Stay ahead of the curve with the latest in tech. Subscribe to Data Dollar now and never miss an update on the innovations that are shaping the future of business and technology. Join our community. China's rejection of American soybeans has triggered economic alarm. The consequences of the cancellation affected not only farmers, but also processing plants and related industries. Moreover, this move highlights the 42,000 U.S. agricultural hectares owned by China through the BH Group, raising concerns about foreign control of critical resources. China strengthens ties with Brazil, weakening trade with the United States while food prices rise. China has begun shifting its agricultural imports from the U.S. toward Brazil, now its main supplier of soybeans and grains. This threatens America's role as a crucial trade partner and redefines the global trade map. At home, consumers are already feeling the consequences. The U.S. Department of Agriculture predicts a 6.4% increase in food prices for 2025, meaning an average rise of $47 in monthly grocery bills. A clear sign that trade tensions are already hitting households directly. China reduces its U.S. debt holdings and bets on gold to decrease its dependence on the dollar. As inflation and rising prices burden American families, China has adjusted its financial strategy. Over the past 17 months, it has cut its holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds from $816.3 billion to $630 billion, distancing itself from the dollar. At the same time, it has acquired more than 300 tons of gold since 2022, raising its reserves to 2,213 tons by early 2025. This strategy aims to build a more independent and resilient financial system amid growing global uncertainty. Donald Trump's proclamation of a supposed tariff liberation day triggered market chaos, leaving investors with more questions than answers. Targeting key partners like Canada, Japan, the European Union, and the United Kingdom, the announcement lacked essential details. Uncertainty persisted about which products would be affected and what the final tariff rate would be. Even Fox News reporter Peter Doocy acknowledged the confusion, noting that Trump was considering either a flat 20% tariff or a reciprocal one based on foreign trade policies. After Trump's ambiguous announcement, accompanied only by a cryptic photo of Jim Jordan raising his hand, markets collapsed, stocks plunged, inflation spiked, and panic spread across key sectors. Without a clear fiscal policy, both the agricultural and manufacturing sectors sounded the alarm, warning they would not survive another season of uncertainty. Even niche exports like American popcorn are losing ground in Europe, reflecting the widespread impact of trade tensions. Concern grows within Trump's own party. Senator Thom Tillis warned that farmers are one harvest away from bankruptcy and called for swift, clear political action before the damage becomes irreversible. Criticism of Trump's tariff strategy is growing on both sides. Republican senators and even Fox News commentators argue that this is not a strategic move, but a blow to the national economy. Senator Cory Booker called it a moral moment, emphasizing that this is not about left or right, but about right and wrong. Senator Chris Murphy was more direct, criticizing Trump's nomination for national security, a Fox News host with no experience and a concerning background. Major media outlets echoed the alarm. The Wall Street Journal reminded readers that massive tariffs have never driven economic growth, and Bloomberg warned that Trump's proposed 25% tariffs could hand the global auto industry over to China. While Trump insists on his America First slogan, the rising tariffs on steel and other imports are increasing production costs, making American products less competitive globally. Meanwhile, Asia is celebrating. China, Japan, and South Korea are strengthening their industrial ties, forming a powerful regional bloc. In the US, judicial elections in Wisconsin clearly rejected the MAGA agenda. Democrat-backed Susan Crawford defeated a candidate supported by Elon Musk, demonstrating that voters want stability and reject chaos. Trump's so-called Liberation Day proclamation caused global economic chaos, not victory. By imposing widespread tariffs, even targeting allies like Canada, Trump framed the measure as a patriotic act. But to many critics, it was an irresponsible move that deepens both domestic and global instability. The reaction was immediate. Canada, once a close ally, became his new target. While MAGA supporters celebrated on social media, dubbing the date Salvation Day, Trump presented a vague global tariff plan without a clear strategy. The announcement further strained international relations and fueled uncertainty within the US. Trump worsened tensions with Canada by accusing it, without evidence, of being a drug nest responsible for deaths in the US. The incendiary comments damaged relations with key allies and provoked widespread backlash. In response, Canada pushed for boycotts, discouraged American tourism, and blamed Trump for starting a trade war. Prime Minister Mark Carney gained strong support, while former ally Doug Ford was blunt. "We will maximize the pain for America. We sympathize with the American people, but this is Trump's fault." What was once a close relationship is now fractured. Canada has publicly condemned Trump's rhetoric, cooled diplomatic relations, and launched boycotts. Internally, key Republican figures like Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, and Rand Paul opposed the tariff strategy, warning it could worsen the economic crisis. With inflation rising and a recession looming, Trump's global tariff offensive seems more like a distraction than a solution, putting almost all of America's trade relationships at risk. At a time when economic stability is crucial, Trump intensifies international tensions. While promoting his "Make America Great Again" motto, his policies could actually speed up a recession. By starting a global trade war, he diverts attention from urgent internal issues like rising gas prices, inflation, and a possible economic slowdown. The consequences are just beginning. Canada responds forcefully. Following the announcement of a 25% tariff on cars, Prime Minister Mark Carney called it a direct attack on Canadian workers. Citizens responded with boycotts of American products and travel. Flight bookings to the US dropped by 70%, and the Buy Canadian Only movement surged. What began as a political decision has turned into a national movement. Canadians are choosing local products and domestic travel as a gesture of protest and sovereignty. From supermarket campaigns to a domestic tourism boom, the country is shifting toward economic nationalism. In Toronto, protesters gathered outside the US consulate with the slogan "Elbows Up," and MP Charlie Angus made it clear: "We will never be the 51st state." The Canadian response now transcends borders. With a strong speech from Prime Minister Carney defending the country's workers and businesses, an unusual unity has emerged between the government and its citizens. The movement has drawn international attention, with support pouring in from Australia, France, and Scotland, positioning Canada as a symbol of resistance against aggressive protectionism. And now, the world watches. The broader question is, are we witnessing the start of a global wave of trade resistance? As Canada defends its sovereignty and economic interests, a change in the dynamics of global trade seems possible. Or this could be just a temporary protest with limited impact. As the trade war intensifies, its effect on Canadian citizens remains uncertain. But beyond economics, this moment reveals a deeper political truth: the power of outsider rhetoric. Donald Trump built his appeal as an outsider businessman, channeling public disillusionment with traditional politics. However, a 2024 Pew Research report reveals that nearly 70% of Americans now feel misled by simplistic, fact-free rhetoric, a warning about how collective psychology can be manipulated in times of crisis. The gap between Trump's promises and actual results is widening, fueling political polarization, social unrest, and economic instability. This is felt strongly in key states like Pennsylvania and Michigan, where consumer confidence is rapidly eroding. To many, it seems like a calculated provocation. Dairo, a New Yorker who has observed Trump since the 1980s, recognizes a familiar pattern: legal battles, media spectacles, and absolute narrative control. The strategy hasn't changed, only the consequences have grown. In February 2025, Trump was ordered to pay $354.9 million for fraudulently inflating his wealth to secure loans. The New York Supreme Court labeled the acts deliberate and repeated, shaking investor confidence and causing a 2.4% drop in real estate indexes and REITs. The ruling reignited concerns about corporate transparency and, for many critics, highlighted a broader pattern: a persistent denial of truth as a defining trait of Trump's public and financial legacy. Alarm is growing. The line between fact and fiction is blurring in public discourse. When leaders reject expert advice and dismiss scientific data, as seen during the COVID-19 pandemic and election disputes, it fosters a dangerous post-truth culture. The Brookings Institution warns that this erosion of truth weakens governance, hampers effective policies, and threatens economic stability. In 2020 alone, the US lost more than $800 billion due to decisions not based on science. This is not just a personal judgment, it is a question of leadership, critics argue, claiming that Trump lacks the emotional stability and integrity needed to represent the nation. Those who once gave him the benefit of the doubt now see him as a figure marked by constant attacks, rejection of science, and erratic decision-making. As the trade war escalates, its ripple effects are beginning to hit other strategic sectors. Soaring uncertainty has driven up oil and natural gas prices, putting additional pressure on both consumers and industries. Manufacturing companies, especially in energy-intensive sectors like steel and aluminum, are warning that rising energy costs could force them to scale back production or move operations abroad. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce estimates that ongoing trade and energy disruptions could cost the country up to 1.8% of GDP by 2025 if corrective measures are not implemented. China's gradual move away from the US dollar and its growing investment in gold are quietly reshaping the global financial system. Emerging economies like Brazil, South Africa, and India are also exploring alternatives to the dollar for international transactions, strengthening initiatives like the BRICS alliance. This trend threatens to undermine the financial dominance of the United States and could mark the beginning of a new multipolar monetary order, where the dollar shares influence with other strong currencies. Facing the loss of privileged access to the Chinese market, several US companies have begun diversifying their export strategies toward Latin America. Countries like Mexico, Colombia, and Chile are seeing a surge in trade negotiations as American firms seek to offset losses in Asia. However, analysts caution that these markets, while promising, cannot fully replace the scale and profitability of China. The transition is expected to be costly, slow, and fraught with political and logistical challenges. If you enjoyed the video and would like to continue learning about technology and markets, subscribe to Data Dollar and leave a like. See you next time.